please make sure you check out our friends at PlayAsia, the #1 site for Japanese games and merchandise.
Probably the West's biggest and most loved fighting game series, Mortal Kombat has a legacy spanning multiple decades with countless games, multiple feature films, cartoons, comics and so on. The franchise is a cultural icon. Its brutal violence was slammed with controversy since the very beginning. It was a big factor in the creation of the ESRB rating system. But it's always been about more than just the gore. The colourful cast of characters are well recognised and memorable, and this series has given birth to just so many quotes and tropes absorbed into Western pop culture. So then, this brings the question, what do people in Japan think of this series? What sort of changes have been made for the Japanese region, and are we likely to see that highly requested Street Fighter crossover game sometime in the near future?
Mortal Kombat 2. アメリカのアーケードゲームで今年度最大のヒットとなるのは確実とまで言われている Mortal Kombat 2がメガドライブゲームギア版にも蘇った。新たな究極神拳を授かった12人の武道家、レイデン、サブゼロ、ジョニー・ケイジ、レプタイル、リュウカン、ミレーナ、スコーピオン、キターナ、クンラオ、バラカ、ジャックス、シャンツーン。
Whilst nowhere near the hit that it was in the West, the franchise was launched with the very first game for all major platforms, including the SNES and Mega Drive, as well as the handheld Game Gear and Game Boy ports. Whilst released in Japan though, the titles weren't properly localized. The games are virtually entirely in English and identical to the Western counterparts. One of the extremely rare exceptions to this is the PS1 intro for Mortal Kombat 3, which has a new Japanese narration over the English text.
シャンツンの傘下にいる影の僧侶に妻シンデルの魂を外界ではなく人間界によみがえらせるよう命令した。
Despite the poor localization, the first two games actually had special subtitles added to their names. In Japan, Mortal Kombat 1 is known as Mortal Kombat Legend of the Advent God Fist, whilst Mortal Kombat 2 was retitled Mortal Kombat 2 Ultimate Godly Fist, this being the name given to the fatalities in Japanese promotional materials. But yeah, the Japanese releases were virtually identical. This means that the censorship found in the SNES port of Mortal Kombat 1 was also made to the Japanese version, marking one of the few times that Nintendo's censorship from this era was made worldwide instead of only in the West. In fact, that's not all. There's actually another difference that can be found in one of the Japanese versions, this being the SNES version of Mortal Kombat 2. Now, to compete with Sega, who dominated in sales figures for the first game, Nintendo allowed this release to be fully uncensored. This meant the blood and gory fatalities were allowed to be displayed on Nintendo's infamously family-friendly console. This was not the case in Japan though, and it's not known why. The Japanese SNES release of Mortal Kombat 2 is heavily censored, with all blood turned to green and the screen turning black and white during fatalities. Having a game censored worldwide on Nintendo consoles was rare enough, but for it to be only found in the Japanese version was completely unheard of. Speaking of Mortal Kombat 2, Japan was interestingly the only region to see the game released for the PlayStation. This version is graphically impressive, although it does suffer from load time issues and poor audio quality. Additionally, it is also uncensored, like Japan's other ports of Mortal Kombat 2, apart from the SNES release. Again, it's entirely in English, the menus, story sections, everything. And no, there was no special Japanese narration like that found in Mortal Kombat 3's intro. It's a possibility that the lack of translations played a part in the series not really taking off. In fact, the very last title to be released in Japan was 1996's Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Yes, that means for more than 20 years the title has been completely absent in the Japanese market. However, this is not necessarily to do with the series' lack of popularity. Shortly following Mortal Kombat Trilogy's release, Japan was hit by mass controversy. A series of brutal killings dubbed the Kobe child murders caused the public to criticise violent media for their effects on young people. In two separate incidents, a 14-year-old boy murdered two young children, with one of the victims being beheaded and left outside of their school for the other kids to find in the morning. This played a big part in the eventual creation of CERO, Japan's console rating system, in 2002. Prior to this though, developers started to feel pressured into self-censoring their games to avoid any backlash over the violent content. This is why, for example, Resident Evil 2 had the death scene censored over in Japan, despite existing before the CERO rating system was put in place. In the Japanese version, the screen fades to black right after dying, hiding the character's brutal final moments. Following the creation of Japan's rating system, censorship of extreme violence was now forced on publishers wanting to release the games on Japanese consoles. Sticking with Resident Evil, the censorship to beheadings found in the Japanese versions of Resident Evil 4 this time wasn't done by choice, but as a requirement to allow it to pass CERO's standards. Hundreds of games have had violence censored in Japan ever since. A recent example being the Japanese game Nioh, which has had the gameplay's dismemberment removed in Japan just like the studio's previous Ninja Gaiden games were censored. This wasn't done by choice, but forced by the rating system. Keeping this in mind, imagine the amount of censorship that will be required to release Mortal Kombat over in Japan. Games not being released in Japan for this very reason is actually pretty common. Gears of War 4, for example, was officially confirmed to be not getting a Japanese release due to the amount of censorship that would be needed. The series isn't completely unknown in Japan though either. It's a popular title for import purchases, and for example the latest release, Mortal Kombat X, holds positive reviews over on places like Amazon. There's also quite a lot of Japanese fan art and other signs of life over on the Japanese side. There was also a rather unusual Japanese tournament consisting of a single American player taking on countless Japanese. Oh, and the American was also blind. You know, the medical state of being completely unable to see out of their eyes, yet still managed to win.
その腕と人柄をした腕し数知れず圭介は言う最強のゲーマーはこの世に二人はいらないひとたびコントローラーを握れば情け無用ネブラスカからやってきた客人はこの圭介が完膚なきまでに叩きのめしてみせようファイト
This was for the PS2's Mortal Kombat Deception and was even broadcast on TV. Hopes of some kind of Street Fighter crossover though definitely seem unlikely, considering that there has been no official release of the franchise in Japan for over 20 years, and that unless the situation with the Japanese rating system changes, it's not even possible to release the games without completely redesigning the constant violence. So unless the situation changes, Mortal Kombat will remain somewhat a curious mystery to Japanese players, like certain Japanese games are for folks in the West, although for entirely not the same reasons. Thank you for watching.